everybody, thanks for clicking. Today, I'm going to walk you through my experience with my Tracker 195 TXW Tournament Edition. We'll cover the purchasing process, what I love about it, what I hated about it, what I have changed, what I'd like to change, and finally, what I recommend that you do the same. So, why did I choose Tracker? This one is simple to answer. The first reason was that it was the major brand in my area. There are plenty of dealers of other manufacturers in the area, but they are just not easily as accessed as the major stores. The local Bass Pro Shop was less than 30 minutes away from my house and about 7 minutes away from my workplace. So this made going and looking at the various models over the years extremely easy. Since it was the manufacturer I was most familiar with, there was a comfortability factor there. Also, when you head out to any lake, you see a ton of their boats on the water, so there's something to be said there. Additionally, the lifetime warranty on the hull is also a bonus. The second reason is the affordability. It's a very cost-effective way to get out on the water. You get a lot of performance for less money than major competitors. So now I want to talk about the buying experience. I shot for boats casually for about a year before I decided it was time to buy. At this point, if you're watching, you probably have decided to purchase a new boat, so I'm not going to go into the thought process that I put into there. That part is up to you and or your family to decide, and if you think it's an important piece that you want my opinion on, leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to do a video on that. Anyway, I purchased from Bass Pro Shops in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma in March of 2019. I did all the research and I consider myself to be an educated buyer for pretty much everything I buy, so it made the sales process very easy. It came down to basically whoever was on duty that day got the commission of the sale. My family and I walked up to the 195 that was on the showroom floor and had a quick conversation to make sure we were still on the same page and that there weren't any second thoughts. Since we were hovering over this one particular boat for a while, I assumed that tipped off the sales guy. He picked up on it and walked over. As he walked up, he made a joke about ready to take her home or something along those lines, to which I simply replied, actually, yes, I'd like to buy this one right here. I can tell he was a little taken aback by that. I'm not sure what was running through his head, but I can imagine seeing what looks like a 15-year-old kid with his family wanting to buy a $30,000 boat on the first contact with the customer, after joking about making the sale, that isn't the norm. So from there, we filled out the purchase contract and had to go through the normal financing exercises, including employment, income levels, simple debt to income ratios, etc. This contract included in writing the $750 Bass Pro gift card and the $300 Tracker merchandise gift card that they were running a special on with this boat. I've heard of a few folks getting burned on this, so I strongly urge you to have anyone include that language of what was promised clearly stated in the purchase contract. Moving on from there, there were a few discussions and options on what additional insurance coverage for the boat and motor, which I denied all of them. The exception being was that I purchased gap insurance. I felt like it was a good value for the cost and lowers the risk of boat ownership, in my opinion. After all that, I was told someone with White River would be in contact with me to work out the details and complete the financing on the following Monday, since it was the weekend. So, Monday rolled around and White River contacted me telling me that I was approved for financing and told me about the deal that they had for me. I want to emphasize the importance of this next statement. You can work out something else. So I asked, what variables could we play with? If I pay more down, what does that look like? What does shortening the term look like? Things like that. Ultimately, we were able to reach a deal that I was comfortable with. That deal was a purchase price of $30,555 as configured, with 10% down at an interest rate of 6.24% for 180 months, which brought the payments to about $240 a month. Now, of course, that will vary from person to person. At the time, I had an excellent credit score of 804, and have a very nice debt-to-income ratio. I feel like I got the best deal that I could have at the time. After all that was finalized, I was contacted by Bass Pro Shops business assistant Lisa to schedule a time about a week out in advance that I could come by and do a finalized paperwork and take delivery of the boat. I must say that the following experience was why I encourage people to buy from Bass Pro Shops Broken Arrow. Lisa was a true professional throughout the whole process that had all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. I kind of know people that can make things happen when I see them, and she was definitely able to navigate this process for me. She was able to coach me when I told her I didn't understand something, and even gave me pushback when she felt like I wasn't doing something that was in my best interest or something that I hadn't quite thought out yet. She even asked to make sure that my entire family was on board with the idea and to rethink about whether I wanted to proceed if not. So it really speaks a lot about a person that would make sure a decision is right for you at the expense of a sale, ultimately, money taking out of their wallet. So after all that was taken care of, we went to the service bay where my boat was waiting for pickup, and they walked me through the operation, break-in procedure, and a witness test of the motor running. I hooked it up to my tow vehicle, and I was off. So what do I love about the purchase? I love the look and feel of the boat. The boat paired with the Mercury Pro XS just looks plain sexy. I upgraded the rims with the tournament edition. They came with that, and it does a really good job of rounding out the whole look of the rig. The graphics are tasteful and are not as cheesy as they have been in years prior. So overall, I love the look of the rig, and I think it kind of speaks for itself. The next thing I love is the layout of the boat is a much needed change from the previous models. So all the way up front, all the important storage compartments are lockable and are plenty big enough to store all of the necessities that you would need. The port and starboard side sport rod lockers that will fit up to 8-foot rods with a little bit of bending in some of the tubes. I have a heavy action rod that's 7 foot 11 inches, and I have to put it on the innermost rod tube to avoid it bending too much. So keep that in mind if you have several rods that are more than about 7.5 foot long. I use the forwardmost compartment to store all the life jackets and all of my tackle. There's slots on each side that I use for items like sunscreen, bug spray, extra line, etc. I feel like there's ample storage for everything I would need, even if I was fishing tournaments. So no complaints there. The final compartment is what I would use for just bulk storage. It would hold anything that I would need for the day, like my camera equipment, backpacks, dry bags for inclement weather, first aid kits, and the miscellaneous tools that I carry. The rest of the storage areas are serviceable, so there's not really much to talk about. So moving on to the performance of the boat. The performance of this boat is one of the major reasons why any of us would even consider buying it in the first place. If you're anything like me, the break-in period could not go any slower. Paired with the 150 Pro XS, it gets up on plane extremely quickly, and it pushes the boat to the low to mid 40s under the 4,500 RPM max for engine break-in. So it wasn't too bad. Still a major improvement over my last rig. So it was fantastic. But the first time that I got to crack it wide open throttle, I was hooked. This thing flew down the lake. It would do almost 60 mile an hour with what gear I had on it at the time, as well as a passenger. However, at that speed and with that little bit of weight that I had in it, the boat was absolutely scary. The thick end liked to slide around like crazy. It almost seemed like there was too much lift or something. Even in the straightaways, it slid around like Tom Cruise in Risky Business. So naturally, I was cautious of making any turns, doing any kind of maneuvers or anything. It would also do the same thing if you had to get off the throttle at speed for pretty much any reason. It would slide as you decelerate. Much of these problems were alleviated once I got a full load in the boat. I think the extra wide beam of this particular boat really shines once it's loaded properly. Even when it was fully loaded, a few of my buddies have said it was the fastest planing boat that they'd ever been on. So all around, the performance is excellent on this boat. One of the next things I really like is the towing. And yes, that seems kind of weird, but most of the time on the boat is being towed. So one of the draws that I had to an aluminum boat was the weight of the entire rig. This allowed me to tow with my daily driver V8 Grand Cherokee very safely. I've driven this thing to all the major lakes around Oklahoma and ultimately halfway across the country to North Carolina now, where I live, and all the area lakes around here. So overall, the rig is everything you would expect while towing. Great stopping distance, acceleration, all that stuff, no big deal. Another thing I love about the boat is how tough it is. This boat is absolutely tough. It's my first boat of this size, so I knew there would be some learning opportunities, and the boat has been very forgiving. I've banged it off docks, ran into stumps, beached it on rocks, ran it in really skinny water to get access to some sneaky spots, all while only incurring minor cosmetic damage. I do treat it nice and keep it as clean and neat as possible, but I do not baby this boat at all. It is a tool, and I view it as such. So I would be really sick to my stomach if I did some of the same things that I've done in this boat in a more expensive fiberglass boat. So what do I hate about this boat? As I said before, it would almost do 60 mile an hour with the limited gear I had on it when it was brand new. However, after only adding about 80 pounds of gear, this made the boat top out at 52 mile an hour maximum with my 7-year-old and I. So that's kind of far off from the advertised speed of the boat. I was so displeased at this loss of performance that I actually evaluated whether or not to install a jack plate that would arguably void the warranty on the transom and or the hull from the manufacturer. Some people were telling me just to deal with it as is, and that 52 was plenty fast enough, but I disagree. I paid for the performance, so I feel like I should receive it within reason, of course. The most frustrating complaint that I have about this particular boat is the aluminum chips and shavings are everywhere. Neither Tracker nor Bass Pro Shops thought to remove the obvious debris left over from the manufacturing. I mean, I get it. The dealer believes the factory should handle it so they don't have to pay for the labor, and the factory believes that the dealer should detail the boats so they can keep their margins higher. Either way, I vacuumed and still continue to vacuum, and I still find chips everywhere. I was also pretty surprised when I found literal trash and loose foam in the bow the first time I removed my foot pedal tray. This is unacceptable for any reason in my opinion, and just plain lazy. I did fill out the customer satisfaction surveys, both from Tracker and Bass Pro Shops, gave them my feedback on this, and I haven't heard a word, and I don't really expect to. Maybe this is me being irrational. I don't know. At least I can admit it if I'm being irrational. Another issue I have is that not all the storage compartments had gas struts installed from the factory, only the forwardmost storage. The first time I pulled out a rod, sat it down, and turned away for just a second, the wind blew the rod locker door shut and snapped the tip of one of my rods off. This was obviously a huge bummer, kind of a black eye on my first maiden voyage. I do fish with my young children, and I knew it was only a matter of time before something like this happened again. Despite all my coaching and warning, my son did the exact same thing to one of his rods, and he was absolutely devastated. At that point, I knew it needed addressed. Another issue that I have with the boat is that the storage compartments don't even pretend to be water resistant. I just know that anytime it rains, I will have to take everything out and run a fan for a few days to dry all the compartments. Strangely enough, the compartments are sealed enough that cool air will get trapped inside and condense when it starts to heat up outside. So initially I lost quite a bit of tackle to rust before realizing I needed to keep all the doors open if there's water in the storage compartments, or when it's stored in cool areas and will be going outside in the heat. The cooler on this boat is subpar and in my opinion does not work at all. Any ice you put in there will be melted probably by the time that you even get to the water. This is regardless of what the outside air temperature is. If it's warm, it will melt just as quickly as if you just left it outside on the pavement. For me, this was a simple fix. The live well lids and sides are not insulated and will kill fish in the summertime. Quite a common problem for any manufacturer, but I feel it's even worse in this case. I came up with a combination of solutions that works for me, but just know that you'll have to take extra steps to ensure fish survivability in this particular boat. I am glad that the tournament edition has upgraded cleats, tied down cleats, but I'm less than thrilled on how they've lasted. All the rivets are loose, and I even had to install my own after a cleat popped off and the boat started floating away. I wasn't too happy to have to go retrieve it. I'd also freaked out my young son that was on the boat at the time as well. So having said all of that, if this is the extent of my issues after all this time, I could count it as a win that I can nitpick on these small issues when others are having some major manufacturing problems. So, what are some of the things that I have changed? First was the electronics. This was a known upgrade from purchase, and many of you will do the same. At the time of delivery, I felt like financing upgraded electronics was a terrible financial decision to finance that over a 15-year period since they don't last that long. I quickly came to the realization that just purchasing a boat in general was considered to be a bad financial decision, and I probably should have just got what I wanted installed from the dealer at the time. You live and learn. So my advice to anyone is to go ahead and get the electronics and trolling motor that you want installed and rolled into the financing after all. Yes, it's not a great financial decision, but it gets what you need, and this is all unless that you're the kind of person that wants to upgrade electronics anytime new ones come out. The stock ones work for a long time and help find structure and fish. But for me, it was just time to go on for something better. Next, I installed gas struts on all of the hatch lids. I went searching for guidance on the struts, and I found what all the tiny boaters were using. They found really expensive gas struts on Amazon. As soon as I found those, I ordered a few sets to experiment with, and before long I had all the hatches fitted with the struts. So no more slamming lids and shed tiers. This is a mandatory upgrade in my opinion. I don't know why it didn't come from the factory like this, but it drives me insane. So, to deal with the killing of the fish in the live well, I insulated the live well lids and the cooler as well. I drilled out the rivet that holds the tub of the cooler in to the integrated step in the deck. From there, it was as simple as using 1-inch insulating sheet all the way around the cooler tub and taping up the seams with aluminum tape. For the lid of the cooler, I sprayed insulating foam in the lid and cut it off flush with a flat saw. To dress it all up, I took aluminum tape to the lid and lined the lid. It looks pretty clean. One of the bonuses of doing it this method is when the lid closed, the foam stuck out enough that when you close the lid, that it makes contact with the plastic trim and creates kind of a seal there. So now anything that you put in there stays cold all day. I did do the same foam trick on the live well lids as well, which in my opinion slowed the heat transfer from the sun a ton. Now I'm not losing any fish and haven't lost one yet when combining that with frozen 2-liter bottles in the live well. The next upgrade I did was rod buckles. So the bungee style tie downs just don't work for me. They were installed where I couldn't put the number of rods that I wanted on the deck and required 2 hands to operate them to ensure that the hook didn't catch on any of the line on the other rods. So I installed a set of rod buckles that are a lot more low profile and absolutely love them. The most recent upgrade that I installed was the hydraulic jack plate. So I knew the boat had more in it than where it's at currently. So I finally decided that I was going to put a hydraulic plate on the boat. I found a deal on a CMC 5.5-inch hydraulic and ultimately pulled the trigger. I installed it myself and could not be happier. Everything about the performance of the boat increased exponentially. The handling, the riding quality, and most importantly, I got all my speed back. I did a test the day before that I installed it and topped out at the 52 mile an hour. And then the day after the install, I hit 60 mile an hour. All the other test conditions were the same. No funny business, just plain results. So it's kind of highly contested whether or not you should add that. I suggest that you do all the research yourself and make that decision whether you actually want to put a jack plate of any kind, whether it's manual or hydraulic, onto the boat. But we won't discuss that any further. Now, what do I still plan on changing? I do want to add more electronics. If I could just wave a magic wand and have whatever I'd wanted, I'd put a little bit of smaller end helix on the bow that would do down imaging, share waypoints with the console unit, and under the control of an Ultrex. So I would augment the Humminbirds with a live scope setup. I'd put the transducer on the Ultrex and just use one of the Garmin units just for live scope. But I'm a few more stimulus checks away from making that happen. So I am an avid DIYer, so I will probably always be tweaking things, and I'm sure that there's always small things that I'm going to mod and take on as I think of those. As far as a trolling motor, I know I said I would do an Ultrex, but that is, by the time that I buy, some new technology may be out. So I guess the only criteria that I'd have is I'd want it to be controlled by GPS so I can fish offshore more effectively, some kind of anchoring function there. This boat is a little difficult to control, even in about 10 mile an hour winds. So I think having that is borderline necessary. The only exception is, if you're fishing creeks and things like that, you're going to be isolated from the wind. But when it gets summertime, especially in Oklahoma, since it's mostly flat, the wind just blew me all over the place. It almost wasn't even fun to go out in the summer just because you get so aggravated that you can't stay in one spot. You spend a lot of time, you find a school of fish, and you try to trolling motor over to it, and you're more focused on running a trolling motor and losing your spot. Even throwing out a marker buoy or anything like that, right where it is, but good luck staying on that spot. It's almost a necessity. That just kind of depends on your style of fishing and what you want to do with the boat. So overall, I'm very happy with the purchase. I've really grown my fishing skills over the year with this boat and have caught some great fish out of it. So can you buy this boat and take it out fishing right off the showroom floor? Absolutely. Are there improvements to be made if you choose? Yes. Again, it really depends on what you want and what you expect from this entire experience. If you were to do a quick internet search, you will discover a spectrum of experience with tracker boats. I'm lucky that I have not had any major issues and not had to deal with a dealer or the factory for resolution to any of my problems. So maybe my opinion is somewhat skewed. At the end of the day, would I buy again? Absolutely. All the negatives to date don't even begin to move the needle towards regret. The memories I've created with my family and friends are priceless, and was kind of the primary reason to get a boat in the first place. So my advice for anybody watching is to be an educated buyer, talk to your family, and be cautiously optimistic about what kind of experience you're going to have with the tracker boat. If you have any questions or think I'm way off base at any point, let me know. As always, if you enjoyed this content, give it a like and a share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.